Nobody told the 18-month-old boy that the man he had chosen to sleep on was supposed to be dead before sunrise. His name was Theo. He had escaped his portable crib at precisely 2:47 in the morning through a method that would later confuse 3 different child-proofing specialists, which was to say, he had simply wanted out badly enough that out had happened. He had padded down the hallway of the East Wing in his yellow sleep suit with his stuffed elephant dragging behind him, pushed open a door that had no business being open, climbed onto a bed that was not his, and arranged himself on top of the man lying there with the complete pragmatic confidence of someone who had located an acceptable sleeping arrangement and saw no reason to explain himself to anyone. His cheek pressed flat against the man's chest. One small hand opened over the man's heart, like he was listening for something. The man beneath him had not moved. His name was Kwon Ji Suk, 38 years old, head of the most powerful Korean criminal organization on the eastern seaboard of the United States, architect of an empire that moved through New York the way water moves through stone, present in everything, visible in nothing, the kind of power that never announced itself because it had never needed to. He was dying. The poison had been in his blood for 4 hours. Military-grade compound, colorless, odorless, introduced through the single glass of whiskey he had taken at the Harrington Deal dinner while 47 people watched and saw nothing. His private physician had confirmed it at 11. 12 hours at most. No antidote in existence. Ji Suk had walked upstairs alone. He had not called his second in command. He had not summoned his legal team. He had not woken the 3 lieutenants whose entire professional existence was organized around handling exactly this category of crisis. He had sat on the edge of his bed in the dark and thought about 17 years of surviving things designed to kill him and felt, for the first time in all of those 17 years, something very close to tired. 3 floors below him, in the main conference room of the Manhattan estate, 6 men were having the conversation that men in this world always eventually have. The conversation about after, about who takes the chair, about which alliances needed immediate management and which assets needed immediate securing. Ji Suk knew they were having it. He had known, before he reached the bedroom, that they would be. He was not angry about it. This was the world. He had understood the world since he was 19. What he had not understood, lying in the dark with military-grade poison working through his nervous system, was why the dying was so quiet. He had expected it to feel like something. It felt like almost nothing at all. And then the door had swung open. And 18 pounds of determination in a yellow sleep suit had crawled across his bed and settled on his chest. And the nothing had become something. A warmth, spreading outward from the small weight pressed against him. The fire in his chest pulled back. Not much, enough. Ji Suk looked at the ceiling. The child breathed against him. He did not move the child. Downstairs, at 2:49, a woman named Aisha stopped mopping. She stood very still beside the east corridor window, her mop handle in both hands, looking at Manhattan blurring through the rain. She was thinking about her brother. She was always thinking about her brother. Marcus Williams, 26 years old when he died. 9th-grade English teacher at a school in Brooklyn who had walked to a corner store on a Tuesday night in October to buy infant formula for his nephew and had been hit by 3 bullets intended for someone else, someone who dealt in exactly the kind of power that operated in this building. She had identified his body. The plastic bag with the formula was still tied around his wrist. He had refused to let go of it even at the end. Aisha picked up the mop. She had been in this building for 18 months. She had come here for Marcus. She had stayed for reasons that had become, somewhere along the way, complicated. She did not examine the complication tonight. She finished the corridor and went to check on Theo. His crib was empty. She found them at 2:53. She came through the doorway fast, her heart already in her throat, and stopped. Ji Suk flat on his back. Her son on his chest. Both of them breathing. She crossed the room in 3 steps and reached for Theo. Don't. One word. It stopped her hand in the air. She looked at Ji Suk's face. She had worked in this building for 18 months, and she had learned to read him the way you learn to read weather, with the understanding that the reading only goes so far, and what's underneath is always larger than what's visible. What she saw now was not the managed, carefully calibrated surface she had studied across 18 months of corridors and conference rooms and calculated proximity. The performance was gone. All of it. Just a man in the dark, holding very still around something that was keeping him alive. The pain, he said. His voice came out rough and low. It's less. Aisha looked at her son. Theo's fingers had found the pocket of Ji Suk's shirt and were holding on with the loose, complete trust of a sleeping child who had decided this was his. She straightened slowly. I'll stay outside the door, she said. Ji Suk didn't answer. His eyes had gone back to Theo. And then, slowly, with the careful deliberateness of a man making a movement he was not certain his body remembered how to make, he rested one palm flat against the small of her son's back. Aisha walked to the doorway. She leaned against the wall in the corridor. She stood there until morning. But I need to take you back. Because none of this makes sense without the night it started. Not 2:47 this morning. The other night. 2 years ago. Aisha Williams was 26 years old when she arrived in New York from London, which she had arrived in from Lagos, which was where she had grown up as the daughter of a mathematician father and a mother who taught literature and believed with her whole self that stories were how people survived the unsurvivable. She had her mother's belief in stories and her father's belief in systems, and both of their stubbornness, which was considerable. She had come to New York for a graduate program in urban policy at Columbia, specifically a fellowship focused on criminal justice reform and the specific economics of how organized crime shaped urban neighborhoods from the inside out. She cared about this the way people care about things when the academic and the personal are the same thing. Her neighborhood in Lagos. Her cousin who had made certain choices at 17 because certain choices were the only choices available. The systemic machinery of it. She was going to study it and understand it, and eventually, she believed with the specific fierce certainty of 26, she was going to do something about it. She had not planned to spend one evening of that fellowship in the hotel bar, the St. Regis, on East 55th Street. She had been there for a conference reception that had run shorter than expected, and she had stayed at the bar for one drink because the alternative was going back to her apartment in Morningside Heights, and she was not ready for the specific silence of that apartment yet. The man who sat down 2 seats from her had not introduced himself. He had ordered his drink and looked at the bar and not at her, which was how she knew he was aware of her, because people who are truly unaware of someone don't consciously not look at them. She had been the one to speak first. You have the look of someone who just survived a meeting that could have been an email, she said. He had looked at her. She had thought later, many times, about that first look. It was the look of a man who had been managing something for a very long time, encountering something he hadn't managed for. Something like that, he said. His name, he told her, was Suk. She told him hers. They talked for 2 hours. About cities and systems and the specific ways that power moved through them visibly and invisibly. He knew things about the mechanics of it that went beyond what she had read in any academic paper, and she knew things about the human cost of it that he absorbed with an attention that felt, to her, less like intellectual interest and more like something older. She did not ask what he did. He did not tell her. At 11:30, he had looked at her with those dark eyes and said simply, "Come upstairs." She had thought about it for 4 seconds. She had said yes. She woke up alone at 6 in the morning. The hotel room was empty. His jacket was gone. His phone was gone. The room had the specific quality of a space from which a person has recently and completely departed. She lay in the quiet for a long time. Then she dressed and went back to Columbia and her fellowship and her work, and told herself this was the end of a single evening and nothing more. 3 weeks later, she was staring at a test result in the bathroom of her apartment and understanding that the evening had not ended in the way she had believed. She called the number from the hotel receipt. Disconnected. She searched his name. She found nothing under Suk alone. She found nothing specific enough to be certain. 3 weeks after that, she found the Forbes article. Kwon Ji Suk, 36, CEO of Kwon Holdings, an empire that moved through 12 industries across 4 continents, and whose legitimate face was impeccable, and whose other face was the subject of 3 separate federal investigations that had produced. In the 6 years they had been running, precisely nothing actionable. She sat with that article for a long time. She made a decision. She would raise this child alone. She would not walk into the orbit of a man like that with a child. She would not do it. She moved forward. She had her son in July. A boy. 18 months old now. His name was Theo. He had her eyes and a jaw that she recognized from a photograph in a business magazine, and she had learned to look at that jaw with love that had nothing to do with its origin, because Theo was hers completely, and that was the whole of it. And then Marcus died. And then Daniel Pierce sat across from her in a diner in Queens with a folder of photographs, and a case he had been building for 6 years, and a very specific request. And then she had said yes. And then she had applied for a cleaning position at the Kwon estate in Manhattan. And then she had walked through those gates 18 months ago carrying Theo on her hip, and a purpose she had been absolutely certain about. She was less certain now. This was the problem. The doctor came at 6 in the morning. He checked Ji Suk's vitals. He stood at the monitor for a long time. He said, "Mr. Kwon, the compound levels, this rate of decline, I have never." He stopped. "Medically, I cannot explain what happened in this room overnight." Theo was awake by then, standing in Ji Suk's lap on unsteady legs, both fists locked in the man's collar, babbling with the absolute conviction of someone making points that were clearly important even if the precise content was available only to himself. Ji Suk looked at the boy the way a man looks at something he doesn't have language for yet. In the corridor, the doctor passed Aisha on his way out. "He's going to live," he said. Aisha held the doctor's gaze. "Good," she said. She said it warmly. She was very good at saying things the right way. Ji Suk did not tell anyone what had happened in that room. Not Ryu Jin, his second in command, who appeared at his door at 7 with the careful expression of a man who had spent the night arranging his own ascension and was now performing relief at its cancellation. Not the 3 lieutenants who filed in by 8 with the energy of men, caught mid-plan by someone's inconvenient survival. Ji Suk sat at the head of the long table in yesterday's shirt and told them the antidote had been located. Nobody questioned it. Nobody looked at each other. Ji Suk watched them. He watched who exhaled with relief and who exhaled with disappointment, and who kept their expressions so controlled that the control itself was the answer. He had one name before they reached the stairs. Park Hyun, 11 years with the Kwon Group, had cried at Ji Suk's mother's funeral 5 years ago, had also gone completely still for 1 second too long when Ji Suk walked into the sitting room alive that morning. 1 second. That was all it had taken. Ji Suk had a plan for Park Hyun by noon. But before noon came something he had not planned for at all. It was 12:15. Ji Suk was in his second-floor office. His body was still weak in the specific way of a body that had been fighting something for 8 hours and had won by a margin it didn't fully understand. Park Hyun walked in without knocking. "Just checking in, boss. After last night, I needed to see you with my own eyes." "Sit down, Park." Park Hyun did not sit. He took 2 steps closer. His right hand drifted toward the small of his back. Ji Suk was already registering the angle when the crash came from the corridor. The specific, decisive, completely unhesitating sound of something heavy hitting marble. Park Hyun's head snapped toward the door. Half a second. That was all Ji Suk needed. The Glock came up from the desk drawer. 2 shots, center mass, before Park Hyun finished turning back around. The room went very quiet. Then, from the doorway, a small voice. So. Theo was standing in the doorway in his socks, stuffed elephant by one ear, looking at the floor lamp he had apparently just pulled over with great personal satisfaction. He looked up. He saw the man on the floor. He saw the gun. He did the thing that 18-month-olds do, which is the thing no adult would ever do. He identified the one familiar face in the room and lifted both arms. Ji, he said. It was as close as he could get to Ji Suk. He had been saying it for 3 days like it was a word that belonged to him. Ji Suk set the Glock down very slowly. Aisha was already running up the staircase. She came around the corner, saw the body, saw her son, crossed the room in 3 strides and scooped Theo up. Don't look, baby. He's fine, Ji Suk said. His voice was lower than usual. Theo was already perfectly content, pulling at his mother's earring. Aisha's eyes went from the body to the gun to Ji Suk. What happened? He came to finish last night's work. She absorbed this without flinching. He noticed. Your son knocked over the lamp, Ji Suk said. The noise gave me half a second. A pause. Twice now, he said quietly. Your son has saved my life twice. She didn't answer. If she had opened her mouth, she would have broken open completely. Not in this room. Not with the phone in her back pocket that had buzzed 20 minutes ago. She nodded once. Ji Suk stood up from the desk. I need you and Theo out of the staff quarters tonight. The West Wing guest suite locks from the inside, until I find out who Park was working with. It's not appropriate, she said. The other staff will not be a problem. Mr. Kwon. Ji Suk, he said it quietly but clearly. You used my name last night, use it now. She stopped. People will talk, she said. People talk the moment your son walked into my room and didn't come out, he said. Let them. He stepped past her. Mrs. Song, the head of household, was already at the top of the staircase. West Wing guest suite, crib, childproofing, tonight. Yes, Mr. Kwon. She paused. The other matter is already handled, sir. Ji Suk nodded once and kept walking. Welcome to Afro-Korean love stories, where love arrives in the most impossible circumstances and stays through the most dangerous ones. If you are new here, subscribe right now because this story has layers that go deeper than you expect, and you are not going to want to miss any of them. Drop your city and the time it is for you right now in the comments below. I want to know who is on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The West Wing guest suite was 3 times the size of the bunk room Aisha had been sleeping in for 18 months. She stood in the doorway with Theo on her hip. Wide bed, afternoon light through pale curtains, a fresh crib in the corner with a mobile that threw small colored lights across the ceiling when it turned. Theo squirmed down and toddled across the floor with great enthusiasm, delighted by the echo. She sat on the edge of the bed. She took out her phone. The message was from a contact saved under 2 letters, DP. Heard about the incident. Park Jin Middle Management. Are you all right? Daniel Pierce, 50 years old, 22 years with the FBI before they pushed him out for digging too deep into Kwon Holdings accounts. He had found Aisha in a Queen's diner 6 weeks after Marcus' funeral. I'm not asking you to hurt anyone, he had said, sliding a folder across the table. I'm asking you to be my eyes inside that house. Documents, names, I bring them down legally. For Marcus. She had said yes. She had meant it. She was less certain what she meant now. She typed, fine, we'll report later. She deleted the thread. She put the phone face down on the bed. Theo had found the curtain and was bunching the fabric in both fists with the specific joy of a child who has identified a new texture. Come here, baby, she said. He came. He always came when she used that voice, the real one. He climbed into her lap, and she wrapped both arms around him and stayed very still. Outside, Manhattan was going about its afternoon. In the kitchen downstairs, the most dangerous Korean man in the city was alive because her son had pulled over a lamp. She held Theo tighter. She did not think about the warmth of Ji Suk's voice when he said use it now. She tried not to think about it. She was not entirely successful. 3 days passed. Then 5. Then a week. The staff said nothing directly. They were paid well enough to understand that saying things directly in this house was a fast route to not being paid at all. But the talk moved the way talk moves through closed spaces, in glances, in pauses before answers, in the particular quality of silence that falls when a name is mentioned in the presence of someone who has a specific relationship to that name. Ji Suk, who had not been observed to smile in recent memory, had been seen crouching on the corridor floor in his suit doing something with a bottle cap and a toddler that looked from a distance like a game. The West Wing corridor, unused for 3 years, was now somewhere Ji Suk walked in the evenings with no apparent destination. Mrs. Song said nothing and noticed everything. Theo learned Ji Suk's name in his own way, which was to say he didn't learn it at all, and assigned him a new one. It happened on a Tuesday. Aisha was finishing the windows in the East Wing when she heard it. Theo's voice around the corner. Ji, Ji. She came around the corner. Theo was on the floor. Ji Suk was crouched in front of him, forearms on his knees, in his morning meeting clothes. Ji, Theo said again, and placed both hands on Ji Suk's face with the complete ownership of a child who had decided this face was his to touch. Ji Suk held very still and allowed this. Aisha leaned against the wall. He shortens everything, she said. Ji is fine, Ji Suk said. His voice had the slightly altered quality it always had around Theo. Lower, slower, the edges sanded down. Theo patted his cheek twice, then held up both arms. The pause lasted less than 2 seconds. Ji Suk picked him up. He stood in the corridor of his own house, holding a toddler who had immediately grabbed a fistful of his collar, and he looked like a man who had not been prepared for how natural that would feel. Aisha looked away first. He started talking to her in the evenings. It began as functional. He would find her finishing a corridor and ask something practical. Was the new crib the right size? Did the kitchen staff give Theo any trouble? She would answer. He would lean against the wall. They would exist in the same space for a few minutes before one of them moved on. But the questions shifted. How long have you been in New York? 3 years. Lagos, then London for a year, then here. That's a long way. It is. A pause. Why New York? Work, and I wanted somewhere that felt different from everything before. He accepted this. He didn't push. Most people pushed. The implicit questions about Theo's father, about being alone, the things that made people feel entitled to a woman's history. Ji Suk didn't ask. She filed that away. She filed everything away. You, she said one evening. The question came from somewhere outside the plan. Did you always want this? No, he said. Just the one word, but the weight of it was enormous. What did you want? Something else. When I was young enough to want things. What happened to it? He pushed off from the wall. Same thing that happens to most things, he said. Someone decided I wasn't allowed to have it. He walked away. She stood with her mop and tried not to feel what she was feeling. She was getting worse at not feeling it. The gift appeared on a Friday. She came into the West Wing room after her shift and found a bag on the table. Handle tied, no note. Inside, wooden building blocks. Underneath, a small padded jacket in Theo's size, deep navy, properly lined, the kind that New York winters required, the kind she had been putting off buying because the good ones cost more than 2 days of her wage. She sat down. She ran her thumb along the stitching. There was no note. There didn't need to be. There was only one person in this house who knew Theo's current jacket had a broken zipper she had been fixing with a safety pin for 2 weeks because Ji Suk had noticed. The quick downward glance one morning when she was carrying Theo through the east corridor, the slight tightening around his eyes. She had not expected him to do anything about it. Her phone buzzed. DP 2 weeks since your last update. Are you compromised? She looked at the jacket in her hands. She looked at the blocks. She thought about Marcus on that sidewalk. She typed, not compromised, will update soon. She put the phone down. Theo was already on the floor pulling blocks out of the bag, saying "Jai" to himself with each one he placed. Aisha closed her eyes. The fever came on a Sunday night. Fast, the way toddler fevers always came. One moment Theo was fine. The next he was heavy and glassy-eyed in her arms, his small body radiating heat. 39.4, high but not emergency high. She had the medicine. She knew what to do. What she did not have at 10 in the evening, in the wing of a Korean Mafia boss's penthouse, was anyone. She was sitting on the floor with his head in her lap when the door opened. Ji Suk stood in the doorway in a dark shirt, sleeves rolled. He took in the scene, the thermometer on the carpet, the medicine bottle in her hand. He came in. He sat on the floor across from her. He put the back of his hand against Theo's forehead. Theo looked up at him with sick, glassy eyes. "Jai," he said miserably. "I know, Theo." He stayed. 2 hours. He didn't make a spectacle of his presence. He sat against the side of the bed while Theo's fever came down, handing her the cloth when she needed a fresh one, saying low, quiet things in Korean when Theo stirred. At midnight, Theo finally slept, deep and even. The room was very quiet. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "I know." She looked at him. Across the sleeping child between them, she looked at him properly, the way she almost never let herself. His face in the low light was open in the way it only got in this room, with this child, the armor completely down. "Ji Suk," she said, his name, not Mr. Kwon, for the first time. She watched what it did to his face, the brief involuntary stillness of it, like a key turning somewhere it had been locked for a very long time. "You both make me want to live," he said, low, rough, the words of a man who had not said anything true out loud in longer than he could calculate. "I don't know what to do with that." Aisha held his gaze for one long, devastating moment. Then she looked down at Theo, at his sleeping face, at the small hand curled under his chin. She felt the thing she had been refusing to feel move through her chest like a current. Warm and terrible. "Neither do I," she said. She meant it. That was the problem. She meant it from the part of her that had nothing to do with plans. Don't go anywhere. This is the moment the whole story has been building toward. Hit that like button right now. Drop your city and the time it is where you are in the comments. Stay with this because what comes next will change everything you thought you understood about both of them. Ryu Jin came to him on a Wednesday. "The men are talking about the cleaner and the child. Shin's people have noticed. They're reading it as vulnerability." Ji Suk didn't look up. Men always talk. "Shin already tried to kill you once. If he believes you have someone worth targeting, he'll move against them directly." Ji Suk set down the document. "Then I'll finish what I started with Shin before he gets the chance. And the woman, the child, you can't promise Theo won't get caught in it." "I said he won't get the chance." A long silence. Ryu Jin looked at his boss, the absolute stillness of him, the certainty. This wasn't strategy. This was something older than strategy. He left without saying what he was thinking, which was that, in 20 years, he had never once heard Ji Suk make a promise like that. Ji Suk told Aisha that night. He came to the West Wing after 9 and knocked, which he had never done before. She opened the door with Theo asleep behind her. "There are people who will try to use you to get to me," he said. "Is this about the man who poisoned you?" "Partially. The other part is that you're here, and I'm not willing to be careless about that. If you move me to the secure floor, what does that mean?" He crossed the distance between them in 3 steps. Stopped close enough that the careful professional distance she had maintained for 18 months was simply no longer possible. It means I'm done pretending I'm not afraid of something happening to you. His voice was very quiet. You and Theo are not staff to me anymore. You haven't been for a while. I think you know that. She thought about the phone in her bag. The contact saved as 2 letters. I know, she said quietly. He reached up. His hand came to the side of her face. His thumb traced once along her cheekbone. The gentlest thing she had ever seen him do. Whatever this is, he said, I'm not afraid of it. You should be, she whispered. She hadn't meant to say it. His hand stilled. His eyes searched hers. I just mean, she said carefully, be careful, after everything. She stepped back. He looked at her a moment longer. Something in his face settled. I'll have the room prepared tonight, he said. The secure floor was on the 3rd level. Mrs. Song brought her up Friday morning. The room was larger than anything Aisha had lived in. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a proper kitchen alcove, a separate sleeping area for Theo with a new crib already fitted, books at toddler height, a mobile turning slowly above the crib throwing small colored lights across the ceiling. Theo walked in, turned in a full circle and said, "Whoa." Mrs. Song permitted herself the smallest possible smile. Mr. Kwon asked that you have everything you need. If anything is missing, you tell me directly. She paused. Not the general staff line, me. The distinction landed with its full weight. One woman telling another woman in the language of households exactly what category she now occupied. Thank you, Mrs. Song. The older woman held her gaze for one measured moment. Recognition. She nodded once and left. Aisha stood in the room. Theo was already pulling books off the low shelf. She sat on the edge of the bed. She took out her phone. DP, still waiting on the quarterly movement report. The legal team needs documentation before we can file. She stared at the message for a long time. She typed, working on it. She put the phone away. She looked at her son. He had found a board book about animals and was turning pages with great seriousness, narrating to himself in the language only he understood. She looked at the room Ji Suk had prepared before she had said yes to coming. She looked at the mobile above the crib that threw small colored lights. She thought about a man sitting on a corridor floor with a bottle cap and her son. About a jacket with proper lining, left on a table with no note. About 2 hours on a floor in the dark, while a fever came down. She thought about what she had come here to do. She thought about what she was doing instead. The gap between those two things had been growing for months. Tonight it felt like a canyon. The gift of information came from an unexpected direction. Aisha was in the courtyard 3 days after moving to the secure floor when she saw the car. Dark, unmarked, parked across the service road in a position that had a clear sightline to the east wing entrance. Different plates from the car she had seen that morning in the same position. Same model. That evening when Ji Suk appeared in her doorway, she said without preamble, dark sedan, service road behind the east wall, 40 minutes this afternoon, different plates from this morning, same model. Ji Suk went very still. You saw it this morning too. I see most things. How did you know what to look for? I grew up in a neighborhood where you learn to read cars and corners before you learn to read books. This was true. It was also not the whole truth. He studied her face with the attention of a man who had built his life on reading people accurately. He didn't push. Stay off the courtyard until I deal with Shin, he said. How long? Not long. He dealt with it in 4 days. She didn't ask how. On Thursday evening, he came to the secure floor with the loosened quality of someone who had put down a weight. He brought food. That was the thing that undid her. Not the gesture, the specificity. Containers from a Nigerian restaurant 40 minutes across the city. Egusi soup, fried plantain, jollof rice still warm. How did you know? She said. Mrs. Song mentioned you hadn't been eating properly. I asked why. You asked your head of household why your cleaner wasn't eating. He looked at her at that. I asked because I wanted to know, he said quietly. Stop calling yourself my cleaner. They ate on the floor. Ji Suk sat with his back against the couch in his work clothes, eating jollof rice from a bowl, redirecting Theo's aggressive approach to the plantain with the practiced ease of someone who had been paying attention to this child for weeks. He looked completely at ease. Aisha had to look away several times to manage herself. Tell me something, she said, something nobody knows. He considered this seriously. I used to draw when I was young, architecture, buildings. I had notebooks full of them. What happened to them? The brief silence before his answer told her more than the answer itself. My father burned them. He had a specific idea about what I was for. His voice was even. The evenness was the wound. I stopped drawing after that, seemed pointless. She thought about a 16-year-old boy watching his notebooks burn. She thought about her own things that had been taken. You could still draw, she said. He looked at her with an expression she felt in the back of her throat. Maybe, he said. The next morning Theo sat on the floor with wax crayons Mrs. Song had quietly delivered. He drew with concentration, tongue between his teeth. One wobbly circle, 4 straight lines stabbing out of it. He held the paper up. Jai House, he said. Ji Suk took the paper. He looked at the boy. He looked at the drawing. Something in him, something that had been frozen for 22 years, broke open very quietly. He folded the paper. He put it inside his jacket, close to his chest. That night, after the building had gone still, Ji Suk opened the bottom drawer of his desk. There was a sketchbook in there, blank. He had bought it 11 years ago and never opened it. He took out a pencil. His hand was not steady. He drew anyway. He drew until 3 in the morning. A house, not a penthouse, not an estate, a real house. 2 stories, garden along one side, a kitchen with windows that opened, a child's room facing east to catch the morning light. In the corner of the page, he taped Theo's drawing carefully. The wobbly circle, the 4 straight lines. House. He closed the sketchbook. He put it back in the drawer. Upstairs, Aisha's phone buzzed. She heard it through her sleep. For the first time in 18 months, she did not get up to answer it. She let it ring. The day everything came apart started on a Tuesday afternoon. 7 shallow steps in the secure floor's East Garden alcove. Decorative, original to the building. Aisha had noticed them when they first moved in. She had been meaning to ask Mrs. Song about a gate. In the 40 seconds, she stepped into the alcove kitchen to turn off the kettle. Theo reached the stairs. He was fast. She heard the sound before she heard him cry. A single sharp crack. Then the silence that was worse than crying. The held breath before the scream. He was at the bottom on his side. The cry came then, the real one. She had him in her arms before she had finished crossing the alcove. His left arm was at an angle that made her stomach drop. She knew what a broken bone looked like in a child. What she was looking at required a hospital. Mrs. Song appeared in Ji Suk's office doorway at 3:12. In 19 years of working in this building, her face had remained composed through things that would have broken most people. She was not composed now. The child, she said. They've taken him to Mount Sinai. His arm, it appeared serious. Ji Suk was already standing. He arrived 11 minutes later. He found Aisha in the corridor, outside the pediatric emergency bay. Her back against the wall, Theo behind a curtain, her arms wrapped around herself in the posture of a woman holding her own skeleton together. She looked up when he came around the corner. Something moved across her face, relief and guilt, and something deeper before she looked back at the curtain. Left radius, maybe the elbow, they need imaging. Ji Suk stood beside her. He said nothing. He stood close enough that his arm was against hers. They waited. After 7 minutes, a young doctor appeared with a tablet. For imaging and treatment, we need the father's medical history. He looked between them. Are you? No, Aisha said. The word came out faster than she intended. Is there a way to reach him? Anything at all would help. She stopped. Ji Suk felt her go still beside him. A fault line he hadn't known was there beginning to move. I don't have contact with him, she said. Her voice had changed. Something underneath was fracturing. But I can give you what I know. Be negative. There's a clotting consideration on the paternal side worth screening for, and a rare enzyme variant that affects anesthetic processing. You need to know that before you give him anything. The doctor was typing rapidly. How do you know the paternal family history if you don't have contact? Aisha was quiet for 1 second. Because I know who his father is, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I just haven't told him. The doctor made a rapid professional decision to take the information and ask no further questions. I'll flag the anesthetic note immediately. He disappeared behind the curtain. The corridor was very quiet. Ji Suk stood completely still. Aisha. His voice came out low. She closed her eyes. Be negative, he said. My grandfather's enzyme variant, not common knowledge. She said nothing. Look at me. She opened her eyes and turned to face him. And in her face, in the exhausted, utterly stripped expression of a woman who had run out of ways to hold something, he saw the answer to every question he hadn't known he was asking. How long? He said. Since before I came here. You knew when you walked through those gates. Yes. The word landed between them, like something dropped from a great height. Ji Suk turned away. Walked 3 steps. Stopped. He was doing what he always did when something hit the foundation, going absolutely still, containing it. He turned back around. 2 years ago, he said carefully, there was a woman at the St. Regis bar. That was me. You didn't tell me. No. Why? She looked at him steadily. And then she said it. Slowly. All of it. 3 weeks after that night, I missed my period. I called the number on the hotel receipt. Disconnected. By then I had seen your name in a Forbes article. I decided I'd raise him alone. She breathed. Then on October 12th, my brother Marcus walked to a bodega on Fulton Street to buy infant formula for Theo. He was 26 years old, 9th grade English teacher. He got caught in the crossfire of a turf war. Her voice was steady. It cost her everything to keep it steady. 3 bullets. He died on the sidewalk, still holding the formula bag. Ji Suk did not move. Your turf war, she said. The question was quiet. It was the most devastating question he had ever been asked. I held his fiancée while she screamed at me in the funeral home parking lot. Why was he out so late? Because he was buying formula for my son. That's when Daniel Pierce found me. Ex-FBI. He'd been building a case against you for years. He didn't ask me to hurt you. He asked for documents, names, justice for Marcus. A silence. I said yes. Ji Suk looked at her. I told myself documents were enough, she continued. But there were nights, Ji Suk, nights when the part of me that is not a good person wanted you dead. Her voice broke slightly and steadied. I am telling you now because if I don't say it all the way, I will never be able to look at our son without it sitting between us. The corridor was utterly silent. Ji Suk looked at this woman who had walked into his house, carrying a weapon built from grief, and had used his own son as the door, and had somewhere along the way put the weapon down. He crossed back to her in 4 steps. His hand came to the side of her face. I'm angry, he said, low, honest. I am exactly what you came here for. I know, she whispered. But he is my son. His jaw was tight. And you are the reason I'm alive to be angry. I don't know what to do with that yet. Neither do I. So we go in there, he said. We be with our son. When he's safe and sleeping, we talk. You still want an after. Ask me again when I've held my son. He pushed the curtain aside. Theo looked up immediately. Tear-stained, left arm in a splint. Ji, he said. With relief. with accusation, with the absolute certainty of a child who had decided long before any paperwork or hospital corridors or truths told in wrong order exactly where he belonged. Ji Suk sat on the edge of the examination bed. Theo leaned into him immediately, his good arm finding the familiar grip on the collar, his head dropping against the chest that had been his since the very first night. Aisha stood at the curtain and watched them. Her phone buzzed. DP hospital report shows serious status. Are you operational? She looked at Ji Suk, at the curve of his back over their son. She typed slowly. It's over. Don't contact me again. I'll find Marcus justice another way. Legally, openly, without using my son. She turned the phone off. She walked through the curtain. She sat on the other side of Theo. The three of them on the examination, bed in a hospital in Manhattan, while the city continued outside, and none of it mattered at all. The attack came on a Thursday night without warning. That was the thing about Shin Woo-yi. He was patient in the way of men who had been underestimated long enough to learn exactly how to use it. He waited until Ji Suk's attention was divided in exactly the right way. Then he moved with everything he had at every point simultaneously. Aisha heard it from the secure floor. The building's ground level going all at once, multiple points, coordinated, resourced, planned by someone who knew the building well. She was on her feet before the first shot. Theo was asleep. She checked him, deep sleep. She moved the crib to the interior wall away from windows, away from the door. Her phone showed nothing. The internal line was dead. She thought for 4 seconds. Then she went into the corridor. She found Ryu Jin on the second-floor landing. Get back upstairs. Where is he? She said in the voice of a woman for whom there was no version of this conversation where she went back upstairs. Ryu Jin looked at her for 1 moment. East Courtyard. He's backed up against the wall. Shin's enforcer is closing in. It's not. She was already moving. The East Courtyard was chaos in shadow and emergency lighting. She came through the service door quick and low. 3 of Shin's men were already down, 2 of Ji Suk's. The stone fountain was the only real cover. She found Ji Suk in 3 seconds. Backed against the east wall, 1 arm hanging at a wrong angle, his weapon gone. Shin's enforcer moving toward him with the calm pace of a man who knew the fight was already over. The expression on Ji Suk's face in that moment was not fear. It was acceptance. The specific acceptance of a man who had survived too many things and understood that the number was finite. 3 feet from the service door, there was a weapon on the ground. Aisha picked it up. She didn't think about it. There was only the enforcer's back and Ji Suk's face, and a choice that had stopped being a choice somewhere between a blackout night and a bottle cap game and a Thursday evening on a floor eating jollof rice. She fired once. Low. Clean. The enforcer went down. The courtyard went completely still. Ji Suk looked across the space at her. At the weapon in her hands. At the woman standing in his courtyard in the middle of his war, looking back at him with steady eyes and not one tremor in her grip. 4 full seconds of silence. Then Ryu Jin came through the north gate with his men, and it was over. Afterwards, Ji Suk sat on the low courtyard wall while the doctor taped his shoulder. He sat through all of it without making a sound. Watching Aisha. She stood apart from everyone, arms wrapped around herself, eyes on the ground near where the enforcer had fallen. The doctor finished. Ji Suk walked across the courtyard and stopped in front of her. Aisha, look at me. She looked up. Her face was composed. Her eyes were wrong, too still. You're okay, he said. I know. Where are you? Her jaw tightened. Something cracked behind the careful surface. I came to this house to bring you down, she said. Low, raw. I told myself it was documents, Daniel's case, but there were nights I wanted you dead, and tonight I just shot a man to keep you alive. Her voice broke. I love you and I tried to destroy you. I don't know what that makes me. Ji Suk pulled her in. Both arms, the taped shoulder protesting, neither of them caring. She went rigid for 1 second. Then something in her gave completely. She grabbed the front of his destroyed shirt with both fists and pressed her face against his chest. I know what it makes you, he said at last, low, certain. It makes you someone who chose when it was real, when it cost something. That's all any of us ever are, what we choose when it costs us. She pulled back enough to look at him. I'm sorry for Theo. For using him, it didn't start real, but it is now. I know. How? Because a woman running a plan doesn't walk into a courtyard with a gun for the man she's planning against. He looked at her steadily. She lets the plan finish. He reached into the pocket of his destroyed shirt. What he pulled out was not a ring. It was a folded piece of paper, soft at the creases, handled many times. He held it out. She took it, unfolded it. A drawing, architectural, detailed, precise in the way of someone who had once been very good at this and was remembering. A house. Not a penthouse, not an estate. A real house. 2 stories, garden along one side, a kitchen with windows that opened, a child's room facing east to catch the morning light. In the bottom right corner, taped carefully, was a child's drawing. 1 wobbly circle. 4 straight lines. House. She looked up at him. Theo gave me that 3 weeks ago, Ji Suk said. I started drawing again that night, first time in 22 years. He looked at her. He gave me back something I lost when I was 16. I want to spend my life trying to repay that. He stepped closer. His good hand came to the side of her face. I want you, he said. I want our son. I want to build something that isn't built on what I inherited. And I want to find the man responsible for Marcus. Not because you asked me, because it's owed. Aisha held the drawing. Felt the paper under her fingers. The wobbly circle and the 4 straight lines. Ask me the question, she said. Now. Now. He looked at her. Stay, he said. Marry me. The courtyard was still. Manhattan blazed beyond the walls. Above them, 3 floors up, an 18-month-old boy slept with his good hand curled around a stuffed elephant, completely unaware that the answer being given in the courtyard below would become the first paragraph of every story he would ever be told about his family. Aisha looked at Ji Suk's face. At the question on it. Raw and real and waiting. At the man who had drawn her a home with east-facing windows before she had even decided to stay. Yes, she said. 1 word. The weight of it was enormous. Ji Suk closed his eyes for 1 long moment. When he opened them, something in his face had changed completely. The terrifying specific hope of a man who had survived poisoning and betrayal and a lifetime of chosen emptiness and had just been answered. He pulled her in. Forehead to forehead. The drawing pressed gently between them. Marcus Williams never made it home from that bodega on Fulton Street. That was the thing that didn't change and never would. But in the months that followed, Ji Suk's legal team and 3 independent investigators spent considerable resources locating the specific individuals responsible for the specific turf war that had taken a 26-year-old English teacher's life on a Tuesday night in October. The case was built properly, documented thoroughly, handed to federal prosecutors with a completeness that 3 years of FBI surveillance had never managed to achieve. It took 11 months. The conviction stood. Aisha sat in the courtroom on the day of sentencing and held Marcus's fiancée's hand and cried for the first time in a very long time. The kind of crying that is also a kind of release. The kind that means something has been put down. They married in the spring. Small, private. A garden in Connecticut where the light came through the trees in the specific way of April mornings that feel like permission. Theo was the ring bearer. He took this responsibility with the seriousness it deserved, which was to say he walked down the aisle at his own pace, stopping twice to examine things on the ground, arrived eventually, and delivered the rings with enormous personal satisfaction. He had a small suit. He was extremely aware of the suit. During the ceremony, he stood between his parents at the altar, one hand in his mother's, one in his father's, not because anyone had placed him there, but because he had simply walked to the middle and stood where the middle was. The officiant adjusted. Mrs. Song cried in the front row for the first time in 30 years of professional composure. Ryu Jin stood at the back with his hands clasped and looked at the specific, impossible, ordinary miracle of his boss, getting married in a garden, and thought about an 18-month-old boy in a yellow sleep suit, and the night none of them were supposed to survive. After the ceremony, in the afternoon light, Ji Suk opened the bottom drawer of a bag he had brought. He took out the sketchbook. He showed Theo the drawing. The house with the east-facing windows and the garden, and in the bottom right corner the wobbly circle and the 4 lines. Theo studied it seriously. "My house," he said. "Our house," Ji Suk said. Theo considered this. "Okay," he said, "our house." He went back to exploring the garden. Ji Suk closed the sketchbook. Aisha was standing beside him. "We should start looking," she said. "I already found it," he said. "Hudson Valley, 2 stories. The kitchen windows open. There's a room on the east side that catches the morning light." She looked at him. "You bought a house." "I drew it first," he said. "Then I found it." She looked at the sketchbook in his hands. She thought about everything it had taken to get to this garden on this April morning. About Marcus and a bodega and a plastic bag tied around a wrist. About a hotel bar and a disconnected number and a decision made alone. About an 18-month-old boy in a yellow sleep suit who had crawled onto a dying man's chest and simply decided not to leave. About the specific, impossible mathematics of all of it. About what it meant that out of all of that, this. "Aisha," Ji Suk said. "Yes." "Where are you?" She looked at him. At this man. At the garden. At her son, currently attempting to introduce himself to a butterfly with the same confidence he brought to everything. "Right here," she said. He held out his hand. She took it. And that is where the story ends. Not in a hotel room that went empty before morning. Not in a hospital corridor where a man learned he had a son. Not in a courtyard where a woman made the most important choice of her life. But in a Connecticut garden in April with a butterfly and a boy in a suit and 2 people who took the longest, most impossible road to standing beside each other and are standing there now. Theo Williams Kwon would grow up in a house in the Hudson Valley with east-facing windows in his room that caught the morning light. He would grow up knowing the full story of how his family began, not a simplified version, not a protected version, the real one. His parents would decide that he deserved the truth, and they would give it to him in pieces as he grew large enough to hold each piece. He would grow up knowing that his first night with his father he had been 18 months old and wearing a yellow sleep suit, and had decided, with the complete pragmatic authority of a child who knows what he needs, that the man lying in the dark was where he was supposed to be. His parents would tell him this story often. He never got tired of it. He always asked the same question at the end. And he lived. He lived, his mother always said. Because of me. Because of you. Theo would nod with the satisfaction of a person whose origin story contained exactly the right amount of his own heroism. Then he would ask for a snack and move on. Which was the right response? Which was, in the end, the only response that mattered. We are not the worst thing we have ever thought about doing. We are what we choose when it costs us something. And sometimes salvation doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it arrives in a yellow sleep suit at 2:47 in the morning and simply lies down on your chest and decides you're worth staying for. Now I want to speak to you directly before you go. If you watched this entire story, if you held your breath when Theo crawled onto that chest, if you felt the weight of the corridor when Aisha told the truth, if you cried when the convictions stood and Marcus got his justice, If you smiled in that Connecticut garden with the butterfly, then this channel was made specifically for you. Subscribe right now. Hit the like button. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the people who save us don't always know they're doing it. And sometimes the most dangerous thing in a room full of powerful men is an 18-month-old who has decided where he belongs. Drop your city and the time it is for you right now in the comments. We read every single one. We see you. You are not alone on the other side of this screen. And one final thing. If you watched this entire story and you don't subscribe, don't like, don't comment, and don't share, that silence puts you on Shin Woo-yi's side. The man who waited patiently in the shadows and moved against people who had done nothing to him, because he had decided their existence was inconvenient for his ambitions. We know that is not who you are. So hit subscribe, hit like, drop your city in the comments, share this story. Because Theo's story deserves to be heard. And Afro-Korean love stories will keep bringing you more. Thank you for watching.